All right, how's it going, everybody? I am here with the winter winners of the first North American Winter Cup, all the way out in California. I'm joined by TN, Anthony, and Zeph. How are y'all doing today?
We are great. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. I'm excited to hear from y'all. So, anybody that wasn't aware, North America had two Winter Cups this year. The Winter Cups in North America are very different from pretty much any other tournament that FFTCG has, including even like the European Winter Cup, because North American Winter Cups are a team event. It's 3v3, but it also follows like the two deck format, but instead of having just two decks, you have to do a three deck team, which means that like the decks end up getting kind of wacky sometimes, and you see some really weird cards that you don't see anywhere else. I found it a lot of fun last year when I went. What did you guys think of the format this year?
Can I speak first? I mean the format, it was actually a lot of fun trying to figure out what decks we were gonna play. Right now I'm running a monster deck that's like water, earth that I wanted to run, but then Anthony was like, "I'm taking mono earth, so you can't really play any of these cards." I was like, "All right, bro." So I dug out this Magisa deck that I haven't played probably in like 3 or 4 months, and I started grinding it for, the last like 2 or 3 months, and then we ended up doing pretty well at the Winter Cup, so I'm happy about that. But and also there was this weird thing they did where they gave us like roles. I think I was DPS, Zeph was tank, and then Anthony was healer, right? Because originally we thought we were just gonna do like ABC, right? Just decide where we sat and everything. They gave us that, and then they told us that tanks were gonna be in the middle, and we weren't really aware of that. So that kind of like caught us off guard. I had to play on the side, and I think Megisa is a little less straightforward than like Mono Earth or Mono Ice are. So we wanted me to be in the middle so we could kind of discuss it, but that didn't really end up happening for us. So
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was kind of the game plan going into it, and then they got shot down kind of fast.
yeah, it was really unfortunate because we really got blindsided. We went to go get breakfast. We came in and we were like, yeah, give yourself like a roll. I was like, what is happening? Like who sits in the middle, right? And they hadn't decided that yet. So literally during like the players meeting, they were like, oh, they just discussed it for like 5 minutes. We're like, oh yeah, thanks for going to be in the middle. And we're like, oh, what the fuck, bro? Like I want to be in the middle, but it's all good. So
that's a little unfortunate. I remember they did this also in North Carolina this year as well, where it literally was just ABC and B was in the middle.
yeah,
So, because for my team, I was the B because I was the one that was most likely to be able to coach either player if they needed help.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's how we did it with my team as well last year at North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us we kind of decided that we could all pretty much help each other. I think we're all like good enough to be able to know what our each other's decks do and like be able to see a line that maybe someone else wouldn't. But we decided that since Megusta could have so many different things going on all at once, right? That's why we wanted to be in the middle, but didn't really work out that way for us, unfortunately.
So Zeph, why did you settle on like mono ice with Clive? What was the thought process there?
So one of the difficult things about this is if you're think it's hard to plan two decks without overlap, trying to plan three decks without overlap is kind of crazy going into it. I think last summer when I was playing in the I wanted to play in the last chance qualifier, and I brought Refia, and then as my second deck I brought Ice Lightning. And so I was kind of thinking about what's a deck that I could play that has the least amount of overlap with other things. And none of the three of us have the darkness in our hearts to play chaos. So that wasn't really a consideration, even though that's kind of an easy pick that like has very little overlap with other things. But I just found this idea. I found a list that I liked, tried it out. I tried it out earlier. Kind of one of the most things I was hyped for the most about this set was the priming mechanic. It was very interesting, and I liked it. And I tried it a little bit over the summer, and then kind of went back to other things. But then, kind of coming back to it, I kind of realized that like when I played Mono Ice in the past, you had to be super aggressive with it because one of the things you had to be constantly activating discard effects. You had to be constantly dull freezing something because the moment that you stopped, because you don't remove everything, they're just like, okay, I untap everything, and now I'm back in the game. Whereas Clive and Jill kind of fixed that issue for you because now not only are you having discards, not only are you dual freezing, but you're also removing things off of the board. And so I was like, this kind of fixes a lot of the problems that game plan has. It offers a little bit less discard, a little bit less still freeze, but in return, you get lots of powerful removal that goes through. And in testing it, I found that it has a pretty good matchup against aggro. Those strategies that try to swarm you, you can remove their stuff and they build more, and you remove their stuff and just kind of whittle them away, which I really liked. And I found in through testing with Anthony that it has a really good matchup against Mono Earth, which I consider to be one of the best decks out there right now. And that is kind of a plus. I did end up playing against that in one of the rounds, and it's just something that I felt really comfortable with as we like tested it more and more.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is a very strong deck. I've done a lot of testing with it myself. It's really fun as well, especially like I've been playing an Une build, which is like really high ceiling but also really low floor. Like if the Une gets blown up or you can't draw summons at the right time and all that. But we'll go into more like specific deck choices as well because there's a lot of really interesting cards in this list that I actually haven't played with very much. And then Anthony, you played Mono Earth. Why don't you talk a little bit about your choice to go on Mono Earth for the event?
So my first thought when I wanted to choose a deck was my default, which is Earth, Water, Chaos Arc, because it's just my favorite deck to play. But I don't think it's really strong right now, and I expected for this event we were going to see a lot of mono decks just by default. And I just thought it would be too much of an uphill battle to consistently have the dark cards in my deck and not be able to play Chaos. And so I was like, okay, well, what other comfortable control deck can I play that is going to fit my style and I feel like will generally do well? I had considered potentially Mono Wind, but I was like, I don't want to grind through trying to become a better pilot with this in a small amount of time, and I just want to go with something that I feel like is more ease of play, essentially. Mm-hmm. So that's why I went with Mono Earth. I kind of like the deck, even though it's very straightforward, but the lines are kind of fun to do, and I enjoy the almost Yu-Gi-Oh-esque plays where I get to consistently search my deck in like a single turn and just make this explosive board, and I just find it to be very fun. So I decided to go with that, and initially I wanted to try out the fire version that I saw a lot at Nats last year, and even when I had played against it there, it was a cool build, and like playing Amat and Terra, and I thought, maybe I could get some good utility off this, and in that case I wouldn't be taking water from anyone else when we hadn't decided on our decks yet, and water is one of the easiest things to splash or play in anything, so I was like, okay, let me not be too greedy with that in a sense. And then after a while, Tiana was like, all right, man, I need the Amats, like hand them over. And I'm like, okay, fire kind of wasn't working out anyway. And I was like, I'd rather have Levy 6 than Amat half the time. And I would definitely rather have Une than Terra. So I'm like, all right, let me just go back to playing the water version. And it just worked out so much smoother. Plus I could play Sophie, which was almost like a last minute addition. But I just kept thinking about her and I'm like, this card is broken. Like she's at 1 for a reason. Yeah, like I need to do some testing.
Sophie's also just really fun to play as well. It's funny. I remember last year I came to a similar conclusion. One of my favorite decks at the time was the Mono Lightning Chaos Arc deck that I'm pretty sure is the reason you still play Chaos Arc to this day.
Yes, it was.
And I remember like going into that event and I'm like, this deck has a lot of really strong power plays, but the problem is because there's so much incentive for at least one team member to be on a mono element in every single team. Like, it's so hard to do. I'm going to do 2 elements, you're going to do 2 elements, you're going to do 2 elements. It's a lot easier to say, well, I'll do 2 and splash a third, or, I'll do a 4-element deck. And then, like, one player will almost always play like a mono water, or a mono earth, or a mono wind. I was like, I don't think I can really do this because the chaoses and the arcs are going to be so much harder to use. So I think it's a really smart adjustment. And I think you also made a pretty smart assessment that wind is both very difficult to play and kind of... especially in an event like this, you don't have a ton of time to prep. Even with a lot of time to prep, I played Mono Wind at Worlds, and I think that like I did not play that deck to the skill level that I needed to play it at that like level. So playing Mono Earth, I think, is a great way of kind of giving a lot of the benefits of Mono Wind. You have the same kind of like constant board wipes, and like when you get to the late game, your late game plays are so powerful, but in a much more streamlined and easier fashion, which also is nice for it's a long tournament day. You guys played 7 total rounds, 8 rounds. Because Top Cut was in the same day as the actual Swiss part of the tourney, so you're playing a lot of rounds in that day. It gets exhausting.
Yeah, we didn't know that going. We didn't know that going in that we were going to have to do Top Cut at the same day as Swiss.
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty. I really like the deck decisions. Honestly, I think that like. I think Megissa does a great job at like tampering down some of the aggression that you can see. Like Megissa's kind of the aggro deck that does well into other aggro decks, and you'd expect to see a decent amount of like, mono ice aggro maybe, or chaos is going to be pretty popular because as I believe it was Zeph that said that like chaos doesn't really compete for slots outside of like Larsa with other decks. I really like the mono ice. I think is a deck that it is not fighting with anybody else for half of these cards because ice kind of does its own thing and does better with the critical mass of ice cards. And then yeah, mono earth is just a very stable, strong control deck. I think it's a really smart set of decks to play. Let's dive in a little bit more on each individual deck, and I'll start with UTN. So you're playing Megissa, and
Yep.
kind of the first thing that I think of when I think of Megissa is you need kind of the right balance of ways to ping your Megissa with payoffs for pinging the Megissa. And I noted it immediately. You're only on only 2 Hedgehog Pies and even 2 Freecast Ifrits, which is pretty surprising to me. You want to talk through a little bit of that, like what led to those decisions?
Yeah, so when I was first trying out Megisa for Winter Cup specifically, right? This was back when Anthony was running the Amats, right, for his deck, right? And so that means I had more room to kind of play around with the deck list. Obviously we ended up, you know, settling on me getting the Amats because I feel like me without Amats, I'd probably fold to a lot of decks. So since I had all those slots, what I experimented with was like putting in like more backups to see if I could have a more consistent backup line. And for me, that actually felt really good, right? Because with a consistent backup line, so I have stuff like Edgar that goes into like Meat Zand, Mont Blanc, Monk, and stuff like that, right? And having that consistent backup line, I think it gives me the CP that I need later because Magisa traditionally I feel like at least the way I play it, I'm not a very good player. Let me set that straight first. But it feels very CP starved from the, just as you get going, right? You're pitching a lot of your hand to do, ping Magisa, to cheat out cards and stuff like that, right? So you're either very frequently you have 0 or 1 card in hand, whatever it is, right? Um, and so having that backup line gave me the CP I needed to do things like, for example, with Minmu, right? With Minmu, now with all these backups, I can pick a card out from the break zone, and then I can play it with the backups that I have. And then it also gives me access to stuff like Vincent and Montleonis, right? And Montleonis has proven to me to be a really good card. I don't know if it's, does fits into the Megisa, I guess, game plan as well as I wanted to, but being able to just trigger that and get, your Axe Stars, your Bosses, your Estolas, right? Even just like an Alpha Dodge, so you can start something stupid, right? I probably wouldn't do that, but if you really wanted to, you could, right? And I think that's what kind of led me to start cutting, see where I could like cut. I don't want to say the fat because things like Hedgehog Pies and the Ifrits are really important, right? But um, but I was just trying to find places where I could cut it to cram in these backups so that if I needed to play slow for whatever reason, not that there are a lot of good reasons to do that, but if I wanted to play slow, I could, right? Just set up the backups, and then eventually I'd have all these backups, and then I could play out, whatever I wanted to, right? And then my other rationale for cutting these as well was that if I was able to play my menu right, so, and then I had my backups right, I would be able to recur the Hedgehog Pie, recur the Ifrit for free, recur the, the one cost Ifrit and stuff like that. So I wasn't really that concerned about not having these, these instant speed pings, so I could do them on the enemy's turn or whatever it is. And they did end up coming in handy, right? For example, against my Knights match in, I think, semifinals, I think what I did was turn 1, I ended up just slamming 2 Hedgehog Pies by, discarding, and then I just passed my turn, right? So that, next turn I could play Megisa, and then once they had their Gorilla board out or whatever, I just, pinged Megisa, played Axstar, Dual Froze them, and I got to do whatever I wanted to do to them, right? So it ended up working out fairly well for me. My individual record wasn't like super great, mind you, but in the games I did play that I did do well in, I think it felt pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you won the games you needed to, obviously, which is the important part.
Yeah.
So yeah, Montleonis definitely is not normal in Megissa, but it probably makes sense because I imagine you need to give Luso over to Anthony because Anthony getting backups is so much more important. Finding those minors. Who ended up taking the? Was there no Little Leela at all? I'm actually surprised to see the Ardens in here. Did that ever come up?
Yeah, I just have personally I have a vendetta against like light and dark cards even if they're in my limit break, right? Because I used to play. I mean, I think you were back there back then, but I used to play a lot of Mono Water, right? The one that ran the 3 Shinryus, right? So you could board wipe in case you needed it. And every single game, I would like brick so hard just because I pulled these at the most inopportune times. And like from then, I just had this kind of this this hate for like light or dark cards, even if they don't necessarily take up spots in the main deck, right? And to me, I mean, the Ardens come in useful. Definitely not as useful as things like the Zac or the Vincent or the Montleonis, but I think he's come in clutch enough times. Obviously, his 6 drop is pretty steep, but 10k Brave isn't anything to really to sneeze at either, right? So, and I think Little Leela is just kind of as a 5 drop. I think he's like 8k, and every time you swing, you reduce something by 7 or 8k or something like that. It's been
Yeah.
a while since I looked at that card, right? I don't know. I didn't really consider it a whole lot, so
Fair
I
enough.
guess that's why it never made it in.
I think you also honestly could even like kind of get people by them not realizing you only had 2 Ardens, so they'd probably be a bit more scared of it than they might otherwise be.
Yeah.
All right, let's go over to Zeph. So immediately, the first card that jumps out to me is actually Amo. This is a card that's seen a little bit of experimentation, but not a ton in Mono Ice. It is really neat with like Anima. You can use Amo to rip the opponent's hand, then play Anima, Dull Freeze all their stuff. But they do get the cards back at the end of the turn. Did Amo end up actually doing pretty well for you on the weekend?
Over the weekend, I can't remember if I ever actually used that hand ability, but over the time that I've been playing the deck, I have used it a lot because it's not only I'm trying to get an extra point of damage with lightning, or I'm trying to anima. Like if they have 5 cards in their hand and you crack it and you play the anima to dull freeze everything, that's only like so good because they still have like a full hand to play with. But something I ran into with that lightning is that, like, yes, they have no cards in their hand. Let's attack and get them to damage 6. Oh, I hit an EX burst and I search a card. Now you're not doing that extra point of damage to me, right? Or IMO, I think more often I use IMO as if, like, I really want a turn to go uninterrupted. Then I'll use that. Like, if I'm expecting an Amat or something like that on, like, a really clutch play, then I'll crack the IMO, get rid of it, do my essential plays, and then they get their cards back at the end. But by then, I've already done all my stuff.
Yeah, cracking it back up to kind of to make sure, like, if Rick gets his first ping when he comes into play, or
Right.
like the Rufus is going to live, so he can like attack and dull freeze and go for game. It makes a lot of sense for sure.
Yeah, and even like if you do run into that situation where you have the lightning, one thing that I kind of overlooked until I really played her a lot is that lightning gets haste if you personally have less cards in your hand. So if you're going for it and they can hit the burst and they can add more cards to their hand, and then you can crack IMO afterwards if you really need that extra point of damage, going for the win or whatever. It's not something that comes up every single game, but it's good enough that I think it's a good inclusion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Speaking of lightning, also, I don't know how standard she really is. I mean, kind of a more aggressive card, and these kind of tend to be more control-y, thanks to wanting to get to the 5 backups to make the Kurosame live. How was lightning on the weekend?
Lightning is great. I love that Snow can search her, so that way, if I pull it early and I'm like, I'm not really ready to play this yet, I pitch her without really feeling bad. Having an extra attacker when you need it is really good, because one thing about this deck I've kind of discovered, you kind of need to be able to kind of heel turn, and I need to either be the aggro person, or it's a matchup where I can kind of like, oh, I'm good playing it slow, dull freezing things, pinging things, but that doesn't work against every single deck, right? One of the problems I had against the Refia deck is I tried to play to that game plan, but Refia can snowball better than me, and I can remove as much as I'd like, but they just have so much recursion and they just have their own so much interruption that matchups like that, matchup like Mono Water, I would rather play it as the more aggressive style to kind of disrupt them as they're setting up. And that's where you get cards like Lightning. That's where cards like Rufus come in handy a lot. One of the main things I kind of want to add, or see if I can add, is the 4-drop Kurosame, where he's just something that messes with their backups, and like against matchups like that is really, really important. Whereas the Kurosame that I have has been really good. He's been really clutch. I like that he can do one of two things. He can either drop the hand, or he can dual freeze a bunch of forwards and backups. But like the cheaper option to freeze backups is really good as well. And it's one thing that I've seen other ice players play that I kind of wish was in my lineup as well, but I'm not 100% sure where it's going to fit right now.
Yeah, I will say one other kind of fun thing for the future. Keep an eye on this lightning. You can play her for free next set off of Yang, the LB.
Oh, really?
Same for Zayzat, actually. That's in Earth, obviously. The other thing I'm kind of curious about the Snow LB. You mentioned searching lightning. Did you consider the Sarah backup at all to kind of get a backup off of Snow potentially as like a budget Luso?
Not necessarily. I feel like my backup line was pretty strong. It's something that like the thing that's in there that can probably change are the jugglers.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something that I haven't necessarily looked at in going in. But it's kind of something that I'm looking for, like looking towards going. Like, do I want to keep these jugglers? Do I want to put in the Quistis? I saw a lot of people playing Kefka, and it's like, is that something I want to consider for myself? Um, looking at yeah, kind of looking at those things, but that's not Sarah's not something that I had kind of looked at going in prior. It was kind of just like, okay, Snow into Lightning, and the Snow himself is not that important. It's just kind of a way to get to the Lightning if I really need it.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, a way of closing out games as well. Snow can kind of help you dump your hand and make sure the Lightning has her haste. She can kind of get in there, do some damage. You have all your dull freeze to make sure that her damage is going to connect, and then end of turn, bop them for the last point. I really like it. I think it's kind of cheeky. And if you don't need the Snow, you just flip him to pay for your Kate Sith or your Kujas.
Yeah.
All right, and lastly, Anthony. So you talked originally. You started with the Earth Fire, which would have had like I assume like Bosches and Terras. You could play like Amaterasu. Um, what was the ending decision to go with the water build? Even stuff like 3 Une actually. Like you're a lot heavier in water than a lot of these mono Earth decks are ending up currently.
Yeah, it was like I just think the water cards are more consistent, and I feel like the impact that like Amat is a great impact card. I'm never going to deny that, but I just feel like Levy 6 hitting the right target sometimes is game breaking, and Une just giving you so much tempo off of being able to play her by herself, or even just reviving her off of Montleonis, I think is crazy value when you have the right board state set up. And that kind of is what pushed me to want to play that on top of, obviously need to switch cards around so that Tien could play the fire cards. But I was much more comfortable with making the switch because of that, so like I didn't fight it at all. I also really like having the ability to, I guess, kind of play. I mean, like Une would be the card herself, or like even Sophie, just be able to play the cards without having to rely on Leo or Tyro Shantoto. Like I don't need that backup fixer. I can almost kind of sneak the cards out of hand without my opponent realizing this is an option. I need to prepare for this if they're just not ready for it.
Yeah.
So I do like that idea, and like I'm looking at my list now and just seeing. I think the amount of water that I played is kind of a lot, but I don't know. It felt comfortable enough for me.
Yeah,
and I never felt like it was bricky at all.
And that's definitely important. And like, there's definitely like situations where it's like if you see some decks, there are turns where you look at your opponent and go, they have one forward and one backup. I'm just going to Une them and it's like just check them. Do you have the removal for Une right now? Well, even though like we both want to build backups, but if you don't deal with the Une, I'm just going to win the game. So now all of a sudden they're in a really awkward spot, and you committed what, like 4 CP and maybe removed like a dead Kusith and Titan from your break zone to do it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, who cares? The value that Mono Earth gets is just so insane. Like, it's not like it's anything new, but it's just the huge bodies, the cheap cost, the constant board fill. Like, it's like, I can wipe your board like 4 times, and you're probably done. But if you wipe my board 4 times, I can still bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's insane. So that's why I thought it was a strong choice.
Only 2 Mist Dragons. Not too scared of chaos. Just figured you could board wipe them if you needed to, or.
I was really wanting to experiment with a couple things here and there, and I was trying to figure out on what to cut down on, and it was between Kusith and Mist Dragon on what to drop to 2, and I decided on the Mist, which I think ultimately was the wrong play. I put in the 4-drop Ashtola because I really wanted to up my EX bursts, because I went in with the mindset of like, I'm fine with taking damage because I'm just going to build up my hand with all these cards I can search. And yeah, I don't know. I thought the Ashtola was cool. I like the idea that I could randomly get a forward back sometimes, and that I could, sometimes if she just happens to hang out on board with Wall, she's like a random AK, and I also get a forward back. But it didn't matter as much as me needing that third Mist Dragon.
Yeah,
Like I think I said it in my post interview while we were there. I think I resolved Mist Dragon like 3 times throughout the entire tournament. Maybe I know I saw it at least or about 3 times, but that was it. Like I never saw this card.
yeah. I would say there's also like kind of a thing, especially in like mono earth mirrors, or like especially like you see it a lot in, like if you ever play Chaos Arc mirrors, you see it all the time. I call them the Mist Dragon Wars, where it's like the first person to be able to continuously resolve Mist Dragon on the opponent is it's such a tempo advantage. Like because either they're keeping their breaks unclear or they're canceling their able to like keep the Mist Dragon to cancel their opponent's Mist Dragons. Like those like Mist Dragon Wars are so critical. So going down to 2 can be a little bit scary sometimes because you feel like you might be losing that tempo in there.
Yeah, it was definitely scary in a lot of matchups. And when I played against, it was in the last round of Swiss. I had to play into Chaos Turbo, and I did not see the Mist Dragon, and I died very fast. So it happens.
It is kind of wild that like Chaos Turbo is like one of the best decks in this like 3-deck pseudo format, just because like the answers to Chaos are so much harder to find in one deck. Then you're stretching that across 3 decks. It's like it is horrifying that deck was kind of just allowed to run rampant. I'm kind of glad that we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
So I guess real quick, because we're kind of running a bit lower on time, what was kind of your favorite match of the day for each of you? Like the single game that you like, if you had it on video, you would have been like, this is the coolest game I played. We'll start with you, TM.
Me? I honestly don't know. I think it was probably the game against Knights, I would say. The rest of them was either I played Chaos Turbo and I got ran over, right, or whatever. But I think the Knights was probably the most fun because, I mean, I think I played around it well, right? I think what I went for by slamming the two Hedgehog Pies down turn 1, it was a little scary because I didn't know exactly what was going to happen the next turn, right? But it ended up working out, and I think making those kind of like not like the best plays. They're like interesting plays for sure, but I wouldn't say that like they're the best. They're a little like out there. I think that's what makes this game kind of fun for me, right? Because at that point I had pitched one for a hedgehog pie, and then I pitched another one, right, to search out the other hedgehog pie, right? So now I'm down to like 2 cards in hand, right? And so I'm pretty vulnerable, but I was able to kind of keep myself in the game long enough to get my Axstar out, get my types and everything out, and so. Just being able to, and historically Knights has been kind of a deck that's given me a lot of problems because Nathan, right? Nathan has been playing Knights since the deck basically came out, right?
Very familiar.
And, yeah, and so I started basically in Opus 22, so I didn't know what the fuck I was doing against Knights, and so I would get beat by it over and over again. But like as I kept playing Nathan and the other Knights players in our community, right, I got really good at that matchup, and I would say that I probably lose to that deck maybe once every blue moon now with all the with all that I've learned playing this game. And I think just being able to beat that deck now is so satisfying because of the way I started, right? Because it's a very scary deck if you don't know what's going on, but if you do, right, then you're in a really good spot. And it just kind of reinforces what I've learned over the past year playing this game. And I think that I'm glad to say that I've learned this much just in a short year.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Zaf? Is there any particularly memorable games for you that happened at the tourney?
I had a couple. I had to play 2 of my games on camera, so that's and the finals game was one that I was probably really proud of because it was a mirror match, and I was like, okay, I need to know. I was like very vigilant about what are the outs. I know the outs because I'm playing the outs. What can he do to me? I was doing things like keeping the Rufus on the board. And like getting him off like 3 or 4 times. And one of the reasons why is because I made sure to keep 3 cards in my hand because I know he's going to want to Victoria me so bad. And so instead of playing this extra backup, I'm going to keep more cards in my hand so he can't ping me off. And I'm just going to keep resolving this Rufus. So that was one that I was proud of. The one that I played against Mono Water, I liked a lot because I was one of those ones where I was like, I have to remember to change up my mindset. I'm going to aggro this guy out a little bit. I'm going to make free stuff and discard stuff rather than trying to build up my own game plan, and just kind of like shifted the way that I was playing. And that one felt really good. The Earth one, I felt a little bad playing that one. I was playing against a guy who was playing Mono Earth, and I don't think he was playing Amots, if I remember correctly, because that was in Top Cut, so we got to see each other's list. So I played Kurasame, made him discard 5, and
Oh.
as soon as that went off, it was over. He had 6 cards in hand. He tightened it or something to get it off, and then from there it was like discard ping, just like there wasn't anything he could do to me. So if one were to make me look impressive, I guess it would be that one. But that's the one that I was like, kind of felt bad for doing that. But hey, it's the tournament. It's how it goes.
That's the tournament. That's the deck. He knows it's in there. What about you, Anthony? Any particularly memorable games or moments?
I really liked my Knights matchup, top 8, just because it's like Knights is just gonna go all gas right away, and I want my time to set up. So as he's building up his board and just constantly hitting me for damage, I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna get the 5 backups. Like, I'm gonna Shantoto you at some point in here, and I'm just gonna get through everything I need to. And I like matchups where I get to LB Shantoto and then she dies, and then I get to backup Shantoto, and then I get to Neo X stat. Like, I love being able to constantly board wipe my opponent, because I feel like I'm constantly in control when I'm playing this deck, and I feel like they just need to struggle to continuously build up their board. And so I board wiped him like between Shadow Lord, both Shantotos, and Neo X. It was like legit like 4 times, and that always feels good to me. So I enjoyed that, but I also did really enjoy playing against I believe it was Jaden on Mono Wind, top 4, and I felt like I had such a broken hand to set up, and I was like, this is gonna go amazing, and like I threw out my whole great board, and then it was just storm, and I lost probably so hard, but in like the most fun way. Like Zidane stealing 3 of my EX bursts and my wool, and like I just felt like I got outplayed, because like you just had like the better luck than I did, and like you were able to just continuously like play this deck to such a high level and completely storm off against my board. And I don't know, I find that fun. I really like that matchup. So that was fun for me.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think like the key to that matchup probably would have been like an early Une and try to like force the Wind player to be doing things into an Une, which is a lot harder because then you also are dealing with like Mist Dragons for the Azuras and Titans when they're trying to get the Rosa cast through and all kinds of things like that. But yeah, best of luck. I hope to hear you guys dominating Materia Cups in the near future. As soon as I'm assuming you guys all have plans to go to at least a couple, if not just the Dallas one. So I'll be rooting for y'all, and yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me and kind of talk about your deck lists and the tourney. I'm assuming you guys had a great time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
It was a lot of fun.
Great people there. We met a lot of people there that were just people that we didn't know that we kind of hung out with all weekend. Great shop, great people. We're going back for their Materia Cup just because everybody who ran it was just so nice.
They were great. They were really great.
Yep.
All right, that's gonna do it. Thanks for thanks again.
All right. Thanks, cool.